Check one. There we go.
There it is.
All right. Moving on to calendar session. Anybody have any edits?
Nothing?
No, I don't think so.
None? Okay. D's public comment. If there's anybody in the audience that has public comment, raise your hand, or if anybody is online, raise your virtual hand on a non-agenda item. Seeing none. Department updates, we have none. Work session, none. Consent agenda, there's nothing. H is old business, there's none. I is other business. I1 is consideration of approval to amend the clerk's office fee schedule. And Carrie's joining us today if we have any questions about that. Good morning, welcome.
Good morning.
So you'll see in my memo to the board and the attached fee schedule with the proposed on the right-hand side as to what fees we are asking a increase for. Most fees are set by statute, so you'll see that most all the other ones, we have no say in them. So if you have any questions regarding any specific one that's being raised, I'm happy to answer that. I think my memo kind of explained the basics of it, so.
Commissioner Sterrett?
I do have one question. We know about the $60 fee, which the clerks were taking the heat for because this was basically for affordable housing that would then go directly to the state. And that was a legislative action. Clerks saw no money, you saw no money, you still retain no money. Is there any effort through your association, the Clerks Association, to either address that or to find out in terms of more transparency where the money's going, why you're not getting any administrative fees?
We have looked into the administrative fee part of it, and they've said that's to be left up to each county, which is what I'm proposing that dollar for. But no, there's no other recourse. As far as reporting as to what that money's being used for, I would have to dig a little deeper and find out if we can find out from the housing authority. When we tried to remove, we put a bill through to remove that component on a filing of a death certificate, because you have people coming in who can't afford to file their death certificate. And so we said, can we please remove the $60 housing fee? And they said, absolutely not. So.
Yeah, I know. You took some verbal abuse when folks showed up, and unfortunately they were shooting the messenger. Yeah. So it's really, it's a shame, but thank you for bringing this to our attention.
Any other questions?
None.
None.
All those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 All those opposed?
Was there a motion?
Oh,
I'll motion.
we have a motion. Any further discussion?
None.
All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Motion passes unanimously. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Carrie.
Thanks, Carrie. All right. Item I2 is consideration of approval to amend the sheriff's office fee schedule. And the sheriff is here this morning if we have any questions. Good morning.
Morning,
Yeah.
Chair. Similar to the clerk, many of our fees are set by statute, particularly with respect to fees associated with civil actions, suits and proceeding fees. There is one adjustment within that section. The primary driver for this to come before you is to implement an impounded vehicle administrative fee for releases of impounded vehicles. We have updated our policy to reflect current case law to be in compliance. We have begun towing vehicles again for uninsured motorists as well as drivers with suspended driver's licenses because of the public safety risk that they pose to other individuals on the highway. There is a lot of requirements when we impound a vehicle to send certified mailers to the registered owner. Those cost $10 a piece. we have fees associated with tracking down who the current owner is. If they haven't been kept up with registration with the DMV charges us to track down paperwork to determine who the legitimate owner of the vehicle is. Then we have to send these notices. So we incur expenses for everyone. We try to be diligent. We researched what many of the agencies in the Willamette Valley are charging for an administrative fee for an impounded vehicle release, and we're right in the middle. We're certainly just trying to recoup some of our expenses. We are not in any way, shape, or form recouping all of what we have invested into processing an impounded vehicle. The others, there's just a couple of adjustments that were made to reflect what a lot of other agencies are doing, just some slight increases. And then there's some fees that we just haven't been collecting we're allowed to collect when it comes to copies that we're required to provide. So if you have any specific questions about any of the fees themselves, I can answer those, but it's just primarily related to that vehicle impound release.
And how much was the vehicle impound administrative fee?
Back when we were doing it previously, it was $75. It's been many years.
When was that set? Do you know any idea?
I have no idea when that fee was set.
Yeah. All right. Any further questions for the sheriff?
So have you calculated just roughly based on past fees, what the difference would mean in terms of how it's going to impact your budget?
We have not. What we looked at was what we know we're going to spend. So we look at, since we've been impounding vehicles again, which has only been about 60 days, if we're looking at that rate of vehicle impoundment, if that were to remain consistent for the entire year, we're going to have $10,000 just in certified mailings to notify owners. So we're just trying to recoup what we have to spend to follow the process.
Okay. And I have a question on the civil process. When you do your final billing for that, or there's a deposit for $1,000, right?
On the sales,
On the sale. When you do your final billing, are you taking anything into consideration in terms of the fee adjustment, or is that just going to stay the same?
so that's an increase for the real personal property sales up to $1,000. We end up having a lot of staff time expended, so this is just making that adjustment up front.
Okay.
So that when we have to do all of the prep work to conduct those sales, there's a little bit more of an equitable payment up front. And then obviously when if the property sells, then the distribution goes out back to the lender or whoever was initiating the sale. So there's some agencies, some sheriff's offices in the state that are collecting $1,500 up front. And then if they don't have that amount of time invested, they're issuing a refund back to the petitioner. That's just unnecessary and a waste of staff time. So every single one of these, we're going to have at least that much invested into the prep work for the sale and then conducting the sale itself.
Well, I would move approval.
We have a motion. Any further discussion?
John?
I'd like to just wish our clerk was here too, just these adjustments on these fees and kind of capturing these rates and the work that you've done, especially Sheriff. I know you've been doing a lot of this work in your policies and so on. And as we work through this structural budget deficit that, I think this is a huge help. So thank you.
All right. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Motion passes unanimously. Thank you. And up next is also, if we have questions for the sheriff, I3 is consideration of approval of an all-terrain vehicle ATV grant agreement number 25-39 between Yamaha County Sheriff's Office and the Oregon Parks and Recreation Department in the amount of $76,742.40 effective July 1st, 2025 through July 30th, 2027.
This is mostly just to help us patrol up in the upper Nestucca. Is that correct?
Correct. This is our renewal of our agreement with Oregon State Parks and Recreation for law enforcement patrols within the Upper Nestucca OHV Park, the majority of which is in Yamhill County.
So going through this, my only question I had, which I texted you this morning, can you just give us a rough outline on the helmets and the cost for those?
So currently, you'll see listed in there in the project expenses, some ATV radio Bluetooth upgrades for the helmets. So currently, when the deputies are up there and they're physically patrolling on the ATV, they have to stop and take their helmet off to be able to communicate with dispatch, or if they were waiting for another deputy to respond up there. So this is outfitting the helmet themselves with a speaker and an earpiece. That Bluetooth connects the helmet to the radio on the ATV itself and to their portable radio that's on their person, so that they're able to seamlessly communicate with dispatch. And the reason that it is Bluetooth is to eliminate the necessity of, if you get off the ATV, that you have to unplug your helmet from the radio on the ATV and then connect it to your portable. It seamlessly transitions from the radio on the ATV itself back to your portable that you carry on your belt. And you don't have the cords that can get tangled up in tree limbs or other obstacles. Or if you end up having to get off quickly, you're not tethered to the machine by a physical cord. So it's the industry standard now for anybody that's operating a motorcycle or an ATV to have the Bluetooth connectivity. And once you get that separation from the machine itself, it automatically transitions to your portable radio so that you still maintain that communication without having to remove the helmet to be able to communicate with dispatch or other agencies.
Welcome to this century.
A lot more that goes into durability, weatherproof, just
Correct. I think I used the example with you. It's not like just putting in a set of $100 AirPods. These have to be super durable. I mean, they're off-road. They're in all sorts of inclement weather. They have to be waterproof. They have to actually work with our radio system, not just with like a cell phone that, you're connecting to. There's more complications in connecting to be able to receive and transmit over the radio system than just what you think of with traditional Bluetooth technology.
I would move approval.
we have a motion. Any further discussion?
None.
None. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Motion passes unanimously. Thank you. Thank you, Sheriff.
Sure.
Moving on to item I4, consideration of approval of Amendment 1 to grant agreement number 35397 between Yamhill County Transit and the Oregon Department of Transportation, ODOT, Board Order 23-343 to modify the project deliverable schedule and correct one replacement vehicle. And we're joined by Cynthia. If anybody has any questions.
I have none.
I have one, Cynthia, sorry. I'm reading.
Good
through-
morning.
Good morning. How are you? Good.
Good.
Reading through the post delivery expenses. What does that? What would that entail? Is it just part of the contract language?
It's just part of the contract language, but I can share that typically how the process works is, say that again, did you say?
Do you see any unforeseen,
no.
Out of the budget?
No, I
that
don't
we-
see anything
okay.
unforeseen, no. And in fact, on this particular grant, I think we have a little more money than we typically do for this type of bus. And so, yeah,
Alright.
I don't see any problem. with that
On
at
a
all.
side note, I know that Gary, I met with him last week at the fair, was looking for an old bus that you're getting rid of. So maybe there's a sidebar conversation there.
Yeah. We usually do those through the auction site and they come before you typically. Now that we do have some vehicles that we've kept as backups that you actually already declared as surplus, but we're allowed to keep them for a while until we get new buses. So,
Yeah.
but I'll make sure to let you know if we have when
Okay.
we're ready to do any of those
Okay.
auction.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.
I'd move approval.
Motion's been made. Any further discussion?
Done for me.
None. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Motion passes unanimously. Thank you. Moving on to item I5, consideration of approval of a quote and purchase of a 3-year agreement of a quote and purchase of a 3-year agreement between Yamhill County and Tech Heads and Dark Trace for information technology related county network security hardware/software in the 2025-26 fiscal year in the amount of $124,199 annual cost. And Shane is here if we have any questions.
I don't.
I don't.
I'd move approval. Any further discussion?
None.
All those in favor signify by saying aye. Motion passes unanimously. Thank you.
Thanks, Shane.
Thanks for coming, Shane.
Shane.
Moving on to item I6, consideration of approval of amendment number 1 to a grant agreement between Yamhill County and the City of Sheridan for water and sewer infrastructure. Board Order 22013, extending the term through December 31st, 2026, and changing the scope of work. And we're joined by City Public, Sheridan Public Works. If we have any questions, or do you want to give us kind of a rundown on it since you're here and you made the drive?
Thanks for coming.
So I'm currently the Public Works Director for the City of Sheridan, but when I actually asked the county for the amendment, I was the acting city manager. The reason that we're asking for that is we found a partner for the project that we partnered with the county, the federal project rather, with the county. We found a private developer. So he's handling about 90% of those costs of that project. The city's picking up 10%, which is the increase that the city needs for the loop that increases fire flow on Sheridan Road. That was through the county. So we found another partner with that who's going to pay 90% of that cost. So we would like to allocate those funds to a different project that does not have full funding yet through either USDA or the SRF State Revolving Loan Fund. We have a $400,000 funding gap for engineering on that project, and that project is on hold until we find that $400,000. Then all the loans and grants will fall into place once we can show that we have the 1.3 million for the engineering. So that $400,000 is coming from the money that was supposed to go to Sheridan Road that we've now found a partner for. So we'd like to move that money to Yamhill Street project, which has the funding gap. And there is another infrastructure project that we are working on. It is Ballston Reservoir. It is a pump station that has been dysfunctional for some time. It provides backup fire flow to the community on the south side of the Yamhill River, and it also provides fire flow to the FCI, which is the Federal Correctional Institute of Sheridan. That is another project. All of these projects are in all of our recent planning documents. They have all been approved by council, and all of these projects have also been awarded to engineers through a public process. So what we're asking is to use the funds instead of for the loop on Sheridan Road for that fire looping project. We're asking to move those funds to a project that has low funding and a project that has no funding.
And this will complete the funding for the project that it's being moved to.
It will complete the engineering costs.
So-
After we have the engineering plans, we'll be going for another grant or an SRF loan fund
Okay.
for construction.
Okay.
Okay, so basically, you're only going to be taking $100,000 from the county money
Correct.
to address. And I have another question about the Ballston water pump
Yes.
project, and I think I was talking to our administrator about this, just in terms of what the federal buy-in would be for that and maximizing loans because of the presence of the prison.
They would have an interest in that project, and they do. We've spoken to them about it. They're one of our stakeholders in town, obviously. They provide us with a great deal of revenue. So we're very interested in partnering with them on any project. And this is one that we've talked to their maintenance facility about. They're excited about this project because it'll also help them during any fires they may have on the property. And currently that station only works in manual, which means someone has to physically go there and turn it on, which means someone has to be contacted to go there and turn it on should there be a fire.
Wow.
Did it used to be automatic?
It was installed in, I think, around 1990, and it has not been functional that I'm aware of since about 2010.
Wow.
Okay,
All right. Do I have a motion?
so moved.
Motion's been made. Any further discussion?
I would just say that this is a great use of being creative with public, private federal dollars, especially as a lot of that federal money's going away. So great job being
I agree. Thank
in
you.
that creativeness. Yeah.
All right. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Motion passes unanimously. Thanks, Kai. Thank you
Thank
for
you.
coming this morning.
Joya.
Thank you.
Moving on to item I7, consideration of approval of a proposed rate increase of 10.27% as recommended by Yamhill County Solid Waste Department and the Solid Waste Advisory Committee, SWAC, for the waste management of Newburgh Transfer Station effective July 1st, 2025. And we have Ashley joining us if we have any questions on that.
Well, just as a, no, I don't have a question for you, but no, I mean, come on up. I was just going to comment, when I was the liaison to, I would show up at the SWAC meetings and saw how much went into making the determination that these were justifiable. So it's not something where they're just basically, making a determination that we would like this, other. I mean, there's a formula, there is due diligence, they got to have receipts. So, it's pretty formulaic.
Yeah.
But thanks for sort of shepherding this.
Does some of this really, I'm not sure about Newburgh Transfer Station, but I know some of our garbage does go to Coffin Butte. Is that a main driver to a lot of this is the capacity at Coffin Butte and how close they're coming up on full capacity and having to look at other avenues? Or is this like increased rates to go out to Arlington?
I have both two reps from Waste Management here that can
Sure.
answer
Yeah.
that.
Yeah.
so.
It came all this way.
Good morning.
Good morning.
So your question is it due to the Coffin Butte? Yes. Coffin Butte, I don't know if they've got their approval to expand like they wanted to, but with the unfortunate closure of Covanta and Brooks, there's more loads going to Coffin Butte. So part of it is the trucking aspect. I'm seeing about a 25% increase in trucking costs due to the long wait time and abuse on going up the haul road to Coffin Butte.
Mm.
So there's a trucking side of it, and then also we took a pretty big significant rate increase to dump at Coffin Butte.
What's the
determined
closure now if they don't get the expansion in years?
The last I
At this
heard,
rate.
it's 4 years,
4 years. Yeah.
Wow.
but that was before the closure of Brooks. So it might be closer to 2 years.
Do you know a lot of background about the Brooks closure?
Not a whole lot, just a little bit.
Can you give us just kind of a 100,000 foot overview on that?
The 100,000 foot overview on that is DEQ is requiring them to do a $100,000 test on a monthly basis for air quality coming out of the incinerator. They requested that they do that same $100,000 test on a daily plan, and they said they couldn't financially cover that, so they have shut the doors on the incinerator down there.
Thank you for that.
If you could you state your name for the record so we can make sure we get that captured?
Jason Willie, District Manager, Newburgh Operations.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So we see the handwriting on the wall. We saw what happened in Riverbend and how that was going to translate to higher rates for consumers. And then with each successive, more regulations, more impossibility fiscally. So where do you go? Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. I would move approval. Any further discussion?
None.
All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Motion passes unanimously. Thank you. I8 is consideration approval of a proposed rate increase of 6.08% as recommended by the Solid Waste Advisory Committee, SWAC, for waste management of Newburgh hauling effective July 1, 2025. Kind of the same background on this one.
Yeah. Okay.
I would move approval. Any further discussion?
None.
All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Motion passes unanimously. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Ashley.
Thanks, Ashley. Thank you.
That brings us to J, which is public hearings. We do have receipt of one public comment for the 2025-2026 county budget. Do we need to go over that?
Yeah, so the
Okay.
first thing you'll want to do is open the hearing chair
Okay.
and
And am I opening the public hearing meeting or am I opening budget?
you're opening a public hearing to
Okay.
receive public comments on the
Okay.
25-26 budget.
Got it. Do we want me to close out the other one or just open this one?
No.
Okay. Open up a public hearing at 10:25 for receipt of public comment on the 2025-26 county budget.
Then the first part would be as if, and we can see if there's any public comment.
Is there any public comment in the audience? Is there any online? Raise your hand. Seeing none.
Okay. Now it's my turn.
Okay.
Very close to here. Okay, so this is we're almost to the finish line on budget adjustment. So this is one of our final steps, which is conducting the budget hearing to get public comment on the upcoming fiscal year. We had the tabloid had went out. We did all the notices for the hearing, had that information. Also as part of this is looking for final changes to the budget before I bring it back next week with the adoption resolution and the schedule of appropriations. And as we typically have in each year's, I have some marching orders that I then come back and then make those final changes that'll be incorporated into version 40, the what'll eventually hopefully be the adopted budget that the board will take action on. So during the budget committee week, a lot of the discussions and the marching orders that I had was around dog control. I do have some other changes that I'm going to be sharing with you, but a lot of this that you're going to see in the handout is related to the open, unresolved issue with the financial things with dog control. So I have some handouts.
And you're talking more of the sustainability of it, right?
Correct.
Okay.
Both the sustainability and also the budget that was built was short funding. So what I did is based on those discussions, and I was going back through general fund and I came up with a solution for the funds. Unfortunately, it's going to require, I believe, an additional work session and possibly a supplemental budget into the new year, depending on the fix, because right now we're limited on 10% to making any changes more than 10% to a fund. The way dog control is built, and it's such a small fund, and what you're going to see, what I'm going to show you here, what I'm proposing is much more than the 10% to fix it. So what I'm going to be asking for is making sure we have funds appropriated in other portions of the budget. So then it'll allow for a future work session, and that the board could then, working with the sheriff and working with the admin team, of what that fix might look like going forward, to make sure we have the funds appropriated and available to do that. And then, but what I have before you, I just can't increase the revenue and expenditure lines in dog control because we would run up against that 10% limit. So it's going to require action post budget adoption.
And that's a work session for the budget committee.
Not necessarily for the budget committee. It's going to be a board of commissioners discussion to talk specifically about the direction you want to go with dog control, and knowing that we have funds available to address that. And then it would come back before the board. We would notice it. There'd be subject to a public hearing, and we would potentially adopt a supplemental budget. It doesn't have to come back to the budget committee.
Okay.
It's just that when the notice went out, it did not, it would have had to have included those further changes, and it was not. So it gives the public an opportunity to see a change that's more than 10%, to be able to get public comment on that. That's why it's subject to a public hearing requirement.
Okay.
So the first handout that I have is a list of the changes. A lot of these changes, and I'll just go through it line by line. And so I'm just going to go in order down the line. So the first change that you're going to see is to the discretionary fund. I'm adding a new amount of adding 415,000. This is an estimate, working with the assessor on what the number, that is the strategic investment, the SIP program with Hampton. We got late word during the budget process that they've completed work, and so we should start receiving that community service fee and the other fees associated with that beginning this fiscal year. And so you're going to see that I'm adding that to the revenue line. So that's the first change that you're going to see there. The second part you're going to see, and it's going to make more sense when we go through here, is adding an additional 102,500 to the expense line 69901 in the discretionary fund. So I went through, based on the discussions with the budget committee, and looked at all general fund departments, looked at both history of beginning balances, who had budgeted ending balances, what increases to discretionary was given. And so I went through and we pulled funds, I identified funds. So wherever you see a negative number that's in that list is where I am recommending that we withhold or, the discretionary allocation to that, and those ending balances be adjusted in those funds. Now, I tried to spread that out as much as I can. The first number you're going to see is the 40,000 that came from HHS. And so you're going to see that reflected in two places. One, it's going to reduce the transfer line, but it's really in Fund 216 where the actual expense and revenue is also going to be adjusted, because we transfer funds from Fund 110 to Fund 216. So you're going to see that reflected, but it's not 80,000, it's a $40,000 reduction. That was an error. You can line out the transfer because there is not an additional $102,000 transfer to Fund 213, because like I said, I caught when I did the math, it was more than the 10% of what's in that budget, so we can't make that change. Sorry, I missed that. So you're going to see the departments and looking at what's there. I have commissioner's budget, I have the assessor's office, I have county counsel's office. You're going to see the whole list as we go down in juvenile probation, juvenile detention. These were incremental increases. I know this could have a potential that when we're building budgets next year, that it could result in add back requests. But again, we do annual budgeting. And when I see an ending balance, the only options that we really have if we're trying to find general fund monies is to reduce the allocation by those amounts. So that's what I proposed. And then the last item that you're going to see on this list, it's a new addition, is for what we pay for YCOM dues. This is one that I mentioned during the budget presentation because they hadn't done their budget process. So I need to increase what we have budgeted by $59,619 for what our dues or the additional cost of what our dues are going to be for the next fiscal year to YCOM.
Ken, can you explain the sheriff patrol $10,000 expense, reducing their ending balance?
Yeah. So
Please.
that was another one. It was just looking at who had ending balances and where I could take a small amount to put that back into discretionary. And so I tried to spread that out the best I could.
I'm wondering in terms of how we already have such a stretched budget in the sheriff's office. So how are we reconciling that?
I just looked at it, honestly, there was a $261,000 ending balance. I figure, and I know it's tight for building next year's budget, but in light of trying to put a Band-Aid on dog control, that reducing that by 10,000, that then we could address next budget season if they start building a budget and they needed every penny of that beginning balance, which they probably do, that this is a way to come up with. Because right now, if the way the budget's built and all these funds that are sitting in an ending balance, we legally cannot spend it during the fiscal year. So it essentially locks those funds in an ending fund balance. And so by doing this, by pulling it back into the general fund and having those funds available, because we might go through, we might not change a thing with dog control, and we might not need to spend those funds. And so we can easily reverse this going into next fiscal year if we need to. This is where as the budget officer, get to be the bad guy, and I'm just looking for funds to be able to implement, because we do have a heavy lift that with dog control, that it's going to require some general fund investment to fix it.
Yep.
So,
And just to be clear, this is just a proposal. We're still gonna iron out the details on this.
yeah, and if you want me to transition, I can share more details about dog control right now to where I came up with the 102,000.
Yes.
Is that amount? Yes. Okay, so the first one that I'm going to share is a handout, and this is a 15-year look back on the dog licensing, basically the revenues that were coming in. I really tried to stick with the consistent dog licensing, facility licensing, room and board, penalties and assessment. Just so you have an idea what we were looking at, because as you know, years ago, this program was self-sustaining, and you can see the big driver was the dog licensing revenue. That was over $200,000 a year, and then it was trending down, and I believe we have $60,000 budgeted for next year. So you know all this. This is the sorry, Mary, I said what? This is the donkey in the ditch. And when I took a run at this, I'm going to have another handout that is going to reflect the approved budget and a possible solution that I'm hoping that we'll be ready to have a discuss at a future work session, but I kind of needed a concept to put together to identify what the funding would look like. And so what I just handed out is if we were to no longer contract out the administration of dog control, and if we brought that essentially back in-house as far as the administration oversight and even having a dog control officer, I put together a scenario here of what it would look like with 2 FTEs. And I have these 2 FTEs not being in the sheriff's office, possibly in another, maybe it's under admin or to be determined where it's located. So the positions that are in here reflect non-sheriff's office positions. And what I had was a dog control officer and clerical support to be able to essentially bring that back in-house. And we'd have to work on all the details and what that looks like. Again, this is very rough draft or a concept, so you can kind of set the stage on where I'm identifying some of the funds to cover this. And you'll see the personnel costs that I have put together. It's about 245,000 plus all the additional. This does not include a kennel or operating the kennel. This is to maintain the contracts or agreements that that the sheriffs work really hard to put into place, as far as contracting out kenneling. So we wouldn't be as part of this including. So I had the contract costs for doing kennels based on what we've had built in the budget. I increased that a little bit. And then also some additional startup costs are going to be associated, fleet costs, things like that for a vehicle. If this is a dog and, enforcement dog control officer that's involved with this, there's going to be some additional costs. So that helped give me a ballpark of what we were looking at, on a basic operational cost of $361,300. So, and now kind of jumping back up into the revenue lines, and the top column, I still have, because it's going to take time for licensing and compliance, we're not right out of the gate going to be back into historical numbers, because obviously, that's going to take some time to restore those revenues. And so what I have built down here is you'll see where the 102,500 would come into play. You would also see that I would be proposing, and we already have these funds appropriated in O&C, but an additional 180,000 from O&C funds that could help as a short-term kind of primer until those, hopefully the licensing revenue catches up to a point without necessarily spending down those O&C funds.
Can I get a little input from the sheriff on this?
Sure. And the sheriff hasn't seen this, so
My biggest question to start off is just give me, because you're dealing with all the licensing right now, can you just give me a ballpark, what you believe, revenue generation will be for next year and the year after, as you kind of see? Did we already get the main bull? I mean, we're 200 and back in 2015, we're at 243,000 licensing income. The one that has the chart on it there. And then predicting 60,000 this year. Can we get back to that 243 or more? I can't imagine that we've shrunk in the number of dogs that are in this county.
No, I'm confident that would be a low threshold for us to achieve with respect to licensing revenue.
Especially if we had a dedicated person that did nothing but make sure everything went out in a timely manner, from reminders and follow-ups and all that. If we had that, what would you think next year's income line would be for the dog license?
That's a tough projection, and I think Mr. Huffer,
Would you break 100 grand on it?
yes.
Okay.
The return on investment, I know I was here when we had a dog control officer way back in the Wayback Machine. And there was always that return on investment and the cost versus of having a public employee. And you know that that's going to be significantly higher than contracting out for somebody who doesn't have roll-ups, doesn't have PERS, doesn't have insurance. So I'm looking at that and trying to figure out a way that we can sort of split the difference, and that we obviously, we'd like to make sure that deputies are not having to go out and pick up dogs and putting them in the back of their cars and that whole thing. That would be optimal. But statutorily, a dog control officer, what kind of certifications besides training, what is statutorily required from your office?
I don't believe that there's anything statutorily required from my office. I think that whether it's through planning or whether it's through any of the other departments where individuals have authority to issue a citation, the Parks Department.
And I can say that I base the position that you're seeing in here is based on our code enforcement officer. I looked at the code enforcement officer because really the dog control, it's county code.
Correct. Yeah.
There's a lot of similarities with code enforcement.
Well, not to make this into a giant work session right now,
I know.
but yeah, I got a lot of questions on this, and I agree with if there's a halfway point between maybe the code enforcement is the employee, but contract out there's got to be somebody out there that we can really have a lot of oversight with to make sure that they get these notifications out in time and actually are in charge of bringing that revenue in.
Yeah. And
without spending $56,000 plus roll-ups.
Yeah.
Because I would just say that I'm sharing this as to share a method to my madness
Right.
of where I was coming up with the dollar numbers, and that with the changes that I have proposed to the budget with the discretionary, and that identifying that 102,500 plus an additional 180,000, it gives some flexibility. It'll fully appropriate those funds to have that discussion during the new fiscal year, because whether it's something like this, if it's status quo, or if it's a modified version, that we have the funds available that we can redirect and bolster the program.
The other thing as we get closer to a work session that I think I'd want to see is there any savings if we're pulling this into its own dog control department and pulling it away out of the sheriff's department, if there's going to be any savings on that end, or if they're so overwhelmed now already that it really, you won't see any efficiency savings on whether, I don't know who's taking care of it now at the sheriff's office for sending
Well,
out.
it's a
postcards.
group effort. I mean, there's a lot of staff time between myself, the enforcement captain, Emily, Jackie. You know, there certainly is time efficiency. You know, if I could speak to your comment, we have been on time with reminder notices and past due notices since, I think, October
Okay.
of last year. Those have gone out consistently, regularly in advance. We are seeing a significant uptick. We are right at the threshold for the current fiscal year, what we budgeted. Yes, it's a low number, but we are going to hit that because we have been very consistent. We've had a lot of social media marketing reminders that people need to license their dogs. So
Through your department.
correct.
The software that we've talked about forever and ever and ever, and that's a thing now. I mean, it's working and it's in place, or are we still getting it in place with Newburgh?
So we did a demo and I have a final recommendation from staff in my office on a direction to move in.
Okay.
And so I have that agreement that I need to provide to council for review with a recommendation for that software.
And I know we have lots to talk about. I'm hoping you can stick around because I just had a meeting with Newburgh and I know you just had a meeting with Newburgh.
did,
and We've
yep.
got a lot of moving pieces, or maybe we just meet another time, but just to factor in what they're also asking for an increase. And then look at, again, when we look at what this is going to cost us
Mhm.
and what we're hoping, is it going to be an, you know, net neutral type of a thing? And so there's that piece. I know I spoke to Polk County. They got this prefab kennel sort of dropped in, delivered. They're going to be ready to go in October. I asked if they had any room at the inn and they said no, and they've got 12 kennels. But, you know, always looking for the different ways, the hybrids.
Did
And
they
get it
say
out.
no before you finished your question?
Well, it was sort of like, yeah, I know where you're going with this,
Yeah.
then let me think about it. No. So anyway, but thank you for putting this together because we did need to get the donkey out of the ditch.
Yeah.
And I know it's definitely a pressure on your office.
Definitely gets the ideas spinning. The other thing to prep for a work session is the reverse of it. If we add this position, is there any other departments that have clerical stuff that needs to be done that could partially be related to this that may overlap somehow? But anyway,
And
Thank
the
you.
endowment piece of that, which has been sort of, we've been limping along with that and how we, you know, obviously we have had to leave that, but now is there another option for additional endowments? Because that was kind of nice. So we'll be looking around for people with a big heart. And a big
Commissioner.
None
heart.
for me.
nothing? Okay,
Just when we get to the work session, you got lots of questions.
Perfect.
Same as you.
okay.
Thank you very much.
Thanks
Thank
for
you,
laying the
Sheriff.
base coat on that.
Yeah,
Thank you.
really appreciate it.
Chair,
Thanks,
I
Sheriff.
return commissioners' papers to him.
I got my own set if you want to have
Okay.
one of those.
Okay,
Yeah, so I mean, this is what I was bringing forward, and so at this point, if there's no further, you know, you can close the hearing
Okay.
and probably. I'm trying to think, did we actually take action?
no, I don't think we did.
Yeah, because if there's consensus to proceed, I will build the budget version 40 with these changes reflected. And it'll be included with the resolution and the appropriation schedules. And I believe that's scheduled for next week.
I agree.
Agree.
We have consensus. Okay, I'm going to close out this public hearing at 10:49 and resume our formal session. Moving on to K, which is announcements. I'm just going to switch it up a little bit again, and I'm just going to kick us off. Monday was the Newburgh Memorial at Memorial Park for Memorial Day. It was a very, very well attended. The weather was very nice, and I think that helped out a lot. But it's so nice to watch these events go on, and the community that comes together and supports our military and everybody that does all of our frontline services.
Sorry, I
That's all
needed a
right.
moment to think. I think we do need a motion to approve the changes that I presented on the list with the striking of
The transfer
yes, the transfer that it's been.
102.
So the motion could be approval of the proposed budget changes to be reflected in final adopted budget with the amendment to strike the proposed transfer line of 102,000.
So moved.
I'm gonna open.
You want me to open that back up?
You don't have to.
Okay, so moved. Any further discussion?
None.
None? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Motion passes unanimously.
Thank you.
You
Sorry.
betcha. No, no worries. Tuesday, we did a radio tower tour of all of our emergency radio services that we have throughout the county that the sheriff uses, emergency management uses, our local fire departments use. Is nice to see all that in person so that our federal agencies that came down, or not agencies, but Gustavo with Merkley's office, Brandon with Salinas's office, and Karina also made it from Wyden's office. They got to see firsthand on what our situation is with our radio towers, and they also got to see firsthand the difference between a well-maintained ODOT site, which we shares on some of the towers, along with what ours has been looking like over the last decades. It's been that way. So anyway, very eye-opening. It was a good tour, and I want to thank Joya for being there, the sheriff, MAC Fire Chief, Reed Godfrey, and Brian Young, our emergency management manager. On top of that, McMinnville had their city council meeting Tuesday night. Visit McMinnville did their annual presentation for that. Yesterday was the butterfly tour. It's actually very interesting. Last year we saw one butterfly. It was about 70 degrees or so. It was today or yesterday, it was pushing 80, 5 butterflies that we saw at least on one site. I think I'm getting the numbers up for next year already. I've been advertising it pretty good. So I don't know why, but it could be the big black bus that we use that has the Parks logo on it now that everybody's like, I got to ride that bus. So it's coming around, and hopefully I can get some more people to get on that tour. It was a little bit light this year, but we still had Dr. Hammond there, who's our butterfly genius. And those guys, it's amazing. I mean, we're looking at butterflies that we think, oh, there's a Fender's Blue. No, that's not a Fender's Blue. You see that little orange dot on its tail? It's like, no, not really, but okay, I trust you. But those guys nerd out on it, and they absolutely love it. It's always cool every year when that rolls around. And it's always fun to hear Commissioner Sterrett's story of our ex-public works manager stepping off the bus and clapping his hands and saying, oh, I got one.
We never saw one butterfly, and you saw what, 5?
5 yesterday.
We never saw
Yeah.
one, maybe because he got it all.
It could be.
No, that
Yep.
was a joke.
Yeah,
But
it was very.
that Dr. Hammond,
Yep.
he knows his stuff.
Yep. Anyway, that was Butterfly Tour yesterday. Don't forget, next Thursday is Chat with a Chair.
Me.
Okay.
You're switching up.
I did,
Taking
yeah.
direction.
Yeah.
Met with John Olson and with the MAC chamber. It looks like he took off today, but just talking about economic development and the future of what that looks like, some of Matt's proposed budget cuts, and maybe how the county fits into the economic development part. I was interviewed, I'm sure you guys do this often too, but I find it pretty fun, interviewed by civics class at the Mac High, videoed it, and it's pretty fun. And then also by a kid in the Boy Scouts, he's a 4th grader. So I love doing that fun stuff. Attended the Memorial Day ceremony along with Commissioner Johnston. Again, very well attended, beautiful day. I love that. Tons of people out there at the Memorial Park. I met with Aaron from the Atticus, and we talked about our visitor economy and just how it pertains to the hotels around here. And didn't realize that her hotel is one of the top 5 in the country. They are up by 2% in their occupancy rate, which is a lot higher and a lot better than most hotels in the area. But obviously with that outpacing the growth of cost of goods and labor. So yesterday I attended a listening session around federal budget cuts and the impacts of mental health and substance abuse in Oregon. It was hosted by Representative Salinas and Bonamici. The biggest impacts that I saw was coverage and community-based organizations. There's obviously a big barrier if these things get cut, and my biggest concern is around coverage. As HR 1 sits right now, the Senate, the federal level, concerns that the Medicaid costs at the federal level will be impacted. 1.45 million people are on Medicaid in Oregon. It's 34% of Oregonians. 59% of kids are on Medicaid, and around 30% of Yamhill County residents. So that's at least from what I can tell. So that's a lot. That's a big concern as that is getting closer to being passed. So, and then met with the sheriff. We talked about our Marine board deals. I've spent some time having conversations with Chief Kosmicki in Newburgh, city councilors, and CPRD as well. We come up with some short-term and maybe even some longer-term solutions to that problem as well. Also got a chance to sit down with Gina, the executive director from AOC, and just talked about the regional things we got going on. So, busy week. Cool. And I'm attending the Fiesta fundraiser this Saturday for the Lutheran Family Services. Yeah. I don't know if you guys will be there. I don't know if that was on the calendar or not. But
Commissioner Stewart.
Okay, just reference to the Medicaid cuts. In talking with our CCO, obviously there are, the concerns because we have to make sure we are clear what Medicaid cuts actually are. And this would be, one of the requirements would be that those who rely on state and federal funding for the health program and are between the ages of 19 and 65 and are able-bodied would either work or be going to some educational program. So it would basically also strip the states of Medicaid funding in the states that use the program to offer Medicaid to those who are here illegally. So I think what we're looking at here is that the elderly and the infirm and those who are relying prior to 65 are relying on Medicaid. It is as designed is for those who are low income and need that care. The SNAP funding, again, that's basically looking at some of the waste and the fraud. So we have to be very clear when we message out that Medicaid is going to be cut because that is disingenuous. So I want to make sure that we're clear about that. Also at the CCO board meeting, we did welcome a new board member, and that's Dory Vickery, our Sheridan superintendent. She's going to bring an awful lot to the board. CCO had an increase in pharmacy and behavioral health costs, so that's impacting them. I've been working with the Marion County Council, and I know our county council has been working with us as well to support the changes to the OHA contracts that we get. Basically, they say, take it or leave it. We're looking at some of the red line changes and saying, no, we'd like to make sure that we have a seat at the table. And if you're going to mandate something, you have to pay for it. And also making sure that some of these changes are not against the best interests of the county. So we're working on a plan that will give us more leverage by joining other counties to basically push OHA and say, we're all in this together and we're not going to sign these contracts. So we've been working on that. And the Mental Health and Disabilities Advisory Committee, I have to say, just a big shout out to the DD manager, Stacy Tolliver. They had the cleanest audit ever from the state on reporting requirements and staff compliance. That is a wonderful group of people. We look at some of the issues regarding suicide attempts and behavioral health issues. And Yamhill County has great access to walk-in behavioral health services, getting folks services right away. We looked at critical incidents such as suicide attempts and client complaints. and that did meet with Senator Merkley's staff, Gustavo Guerrero, and Congresswoman Salinas' field rep. We talked about what the impact of not hearing so far about that EMPG grant, which is pretty much what we fund 50% of our emergency manager, his salary on. One of the infrastructure grants has not been renewed, but there is no information on this EMPG grant. So they're going to be chasing that down. I have to say, very much appreciate their professionalism and the fact that they were willing to come and meet with Sergeant Young and myself. And the Sheridan Fire District Plan, as we all know, Chief Thomas has resigned, and we will be meeting, we're having a special ASA meeting today at 1 o'clock. There are some contingency plans and conversations with Chief Warden, looking at what we will do, and then we will have a follow-up meeting to figure out whether or not there needs to be a variance in the ASA plan. The Newburgh Animal Shelter, I met with them yesterday, and we talked about some of their concerns and how we can move forward. They've been a wonderful partner. And again, the ASA meeting, we have another one coming up in a couple of weeks. CPRD is unfortunately going to be closing their Bonnie Benedict Childcare Daycare Center, and that's because of low enrollment. Because the building is in such disrepair, folks are really not comfortable leaving their kids there. But they're going to close it down and then look for some grants, about $1 million in grants to rehab that. And also, we've had some discussions about Crabtree Park. I'll be meeting with Clay next week to talk about some of their interest, bring that back before the board very shortly. Housing Authority Board meeting was this week, and we talked about some of the funding that they have. They're getting some great grants, including one that's going to be helping veterans who are homeowners and live in their homes, keep their homes, and deal with some of the safety issues that they have. The Newburgh Community Excise Tax Grant, they've got 6 grants for families in the loop. There are 4 grants out there now. They're doing a great job. They're supporting Affordable Housing Corporation. And just an update for those of us who've been watching the foreclosed properties, the Church Street property and the Ford Street property are moving ahead, and we've had lots of issues with those, but it looks like they're going to get them rehabbed and on the market. So I'll stop there because you're probably out of it. Anyway, that's just some of the stuff we've been doing.
Fantastic. All right, with that, any other business?
Well, before we close out, I just want to welcome Kevin.
yes.
Put Kevin on the spot,
Yeah.
you know, that Kevin Perkins joined us this week as our Public Information Officer, Deputy County Administrator, and just brings a wealth of knowledge and, you know, and just want to recognize that and welcome him
Yeah.
here.
Welcome,
Yeah, welcome.
welcome. Glad you're here.
We're excited.
Drinking from the fire hose.
Yep.
Yeah, that's a lot.
All right. There's no further business. I'm going to close